What's going on, guys? This is Jake at That Fit Friend, and today I'm reviewing the Nike Legend Essential 2. So I have had a few asks about the shoe on my channel, and as a very budget-friendly model, I wanted to know where this shoe excels and where it falls short. So 3 pros that I have with this model is number 1, obviously the price point. So at a price of $60 USD, this is definitely one of the more budget-friendly training shoes on the market. And if you shop around and look through different retail outlets or for colorways that are not so popular, you can actually generally find this model on sale for like $45 or $50 USD. So if you are trying to save as much money as possible, or if you want a training shoe that you can just beat up and not feel guilty about when it comes to their price point, this is a good model to look into. The second pro that I have with this shoe is that as a budget-friendly training shoe, they can kind of hold their own in a lot of different realms in the gym. Now, they are not going to be the best for serious training, but when it comes to more casual stuff, like this model does pretty good. So in the context of lifting, I started noticing compression when I got above 315 pounds in the shoe. So if you are training a little bit lighter, or if you just want a shoe for some upper body days, the shoe should work pretty well. And then when it comes to like HIIT workouts, short runs, and versatile training sessions, the midsole is responsive enough to not beat your feet up. And I think if you're using them for like 45 minutes or like an hour long when it comes to those styles of workouts, you should be plenty fine with this model and their comfort. For longer sessions, they start to fall off, but I'll talk about that in my cons section. My third pro with this shoe is the overall lightweight nature of it and the breathability of the upper. So for my size 10 model, we have a weight of 9.3 ounces, and then we have a honeycomb mesh on the upper. It breathes pretty well, so I think this is a good shoe for just daily wear. So for example, if you want to invest in a training shoe that you can kind of beat up on a daily wear basis and not necessarily feel bad about, this is a good model to look into, and it kind of holds its own in the gym. So you could wear them to the gym and on a daily wear basis and get away with them and save some money at the process. But that being said, let's talk about a couple of cons I have with this model. So 2 potential cons I could see folks having with the Nike Legend Essential 2 is number 1, this shoe's performance as you start to get more serious or more niche with your training. And this is something that tends to stand true with most budget-friendly training shoes. So I mentioned this before, but above 315 pounds, I could see stability being an issue. So if you are investing in this model to train super heavy, I would definitely say consider that before doing so. And then when it comes to longer sessions, why I don't like this shoe is that you don't get a ton of midfoot support and it doesn't really sit the flattest. So as you start getting a little bit more fatigued, I started to notice that my foot was kind of collapsing in because it doesn't have a ton of rigid structure here on the medial sidewall. The second potential con I could see folks having with this model is the long-term durability. And at a price point of like $60 USD, I guess it's kind of to be expected, but where I could see the shoe's durability falling short is right here on the midfoot and up here on the forefoot in regard to the foam in the midsole. So we have exposed foam here, and the midsole up here in the forefoot sits pretty close to the ground. So if you're training outdoors a lot, you might get a little bit of scuffing or breakdown of this midsole. And I would say as a daily wear shoe, this model works really well. But if you're wearing them in like the mud or the rain, just be conscious of how much water is getting soaked into the foam so you don't have any breakdown issues there. But now let's dive into the performance of this model. When chatting on the performance of the Nike Legend Essential 2, I'm gonna break this section to a few different parts. I'm gonna talk about lifting, versatile training, shorter runs, and then daily wear. In the context of lifting, I think this model is going to be best for beginners or folks who just want this model for some very casual lifting. So I mentioned this in my pros, but with this shoe's stability, you are going to be a little bit limited. So if you're training above 315 pounds, for example, I think stability could definitely be an issue and you'll start to notice more compression. Plus, with how this shoe pretty much sits, it doesn't sit the flattest, and I could see that being an issue for some lifting contexts where balance is a factor. So as you get heavier, you definitely don't want to have to worry about balance in your training shoes. So just something to think about if you plan to use this shoe for lifting. For versatile training, this model is okay. And what I like about the shoe is that the midsole gives you a nice level of pop and it's pretty comfortable. And the shoe is lightweight as a whole, so it does feel athletic in nature. What I don't like about the shoe for versatile training is that lacking midfoot support, especially if you're doing single leg stuff. So if you're doing like unilateral box jumps or single leg explosive work, I could see that being an issue, especially for folks who do rely on a little bit more midfoot support in their training shoes. For shorter runs, this model is okay, and I think it'll work for like that casual 1 or 2 or 3 miles before or after your workout sessions. And if you plan to use them on a treadmill, I think you'll get more out of the shoe. For outdoor running, once again, I do think the midsole and the exposed foam could be an issue, especially with durability. So just something to think about if you plan to run in the shoe. I think you'll get a lot more out of them if you plan to only do shorter runs on treadmills. For daily wear, I like this model. It's pretty comfortable, and as as just a daily driver for $60 USD, like this is a shoe that you can beat up and not necessarily feel super guilty about, or like you have a sunk cost fallacy going on with how much you spent on them. The one thing I will say is that if you're somebody who does rely on that midfoot support, if you're standing in this shoe all day, that could be something to think about. But for walking and just some general daily wear, this model will work pretty well, and the price point makes sense if you just want a shoe to beat up and get a little bit dirty. So now let's answer the question, who are these best for? So I think if you are trying to be super budget friendly with your training shoes and you need something that works decently well for more casual stuff that you can wear on a daily basis and beat up and not feel like you sunk a ton of money into a shoe that's breaking down fast, I think this model could be a really good option to look into. It is a pretty good budget-friendly training shoe. It will have some limitations, but if you are trying to save a little bit of money, I think you should be safe with this model, especially if you're keeping your sessions a little bit more casual in nature. So when it comes to sizing and fit in the Nike Legend Essential 2, the forefoot is pretty narrow. So what I would suggest is that if you have a neutral width or a wider foot width, go up a half size in this model. And if you have a narrow foot width, you should be safe going true to size in this shoe. When chatting on price in this model, I mentioned this already in the pros, but you can expect to pay $60 USD. So if you're trying to save a bunch of money on your training shoes, this could be a really good option to look into. Plus, if you shop around and look at different retail outlets or look for not as popular colorways, you can generally find this model on sale for like $45, $50, and even $55 USD. So now let's talk about the weight, heel to toe drop, and insole in this model. So for my size 10 shoe here, we have a weight of 9.3 ounces. When it comes to the heel to toe drop, I actually don't have it for this model. I reached out to Nike's support team and they said they don't have one for this shoe, which I find to be really odd. But that being said, it does feel like it's a little bit higher in nature. So I would guess it's probably around like 6 to 8 millimeters. And then when it comes to the insole, you can remove this insole, but there's a light adhesive. So technically it doesn't have a removable insole, but if you want to put in your own custom orthotics, this insole would not be too difficult to take out. All right, so now let's quickly go over the construction of the Nike Legend Essential 2. Up here on the toe box, we have an extended outsole layer that wraps up. And then looking at the midsole, we have a foam material that extends the entirety of this shoe's midsole. And then as mentioned before, the shoe doesn't really sit flat. And so looking at the midsole construction, we do have a medial and lateral sidewall here that provide a little bit of additional support, but without that rubber on the midsole here, and without having a bit more of like a structured construction, you do start to have a little bit of collapse in the shoe, despite it having like this medial sidewall. So as mentioned before too, if you do need a little bit more midfoot support, that is definitely something to consider in this model. We have a honeycomb mesh upper throughout. We do have some layering back here with like some synthetic overlays and a Nike swoosh on the lateral and medial side of the shoe. The boot's construction is pretty thick in nature and it has a good amount of padding. So if you do like having a bit more cushion in the boot of your shoe when it comes to like the sidewalls and the heel counter, I think you will like that about this model. And then looking at the midfoot, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 core eyelets with a 5th back here for lace lock, and the tongue itself is pretty breathable and thick in nature, and there is an external loop here, so you don't really have any lipping of the tongue when training. And then looking at the insole, once again, the shoe does not have a removable insole, but the insole only has a light adhesive, so you can technically take it out if you want. And that wraps up the construction of this shoe. If you have any additional questions on this model, hit me in the comments below. All right guys, that wraps up my review of the Nike Legend Essential 2. For $60 USD, this is a pretty good shoe for some more casual training and daily wear. If you have any additional questions on this model, hit me in the comments below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And as always guys, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.